Alright, we got another long video coming your guys' way. If you guys remember in the last video, we done some of the body work. This time we're going to finish it up. To recap, I'd filled in all the body lines where the hidden compartments in the gas tank was. I made a roll pan. I glued in most of the body pieces. That's a firewall and a core support. I also made the body and the bed one. With all the test fitting I was doing, it's just easier just to put it all together as one piece. And to do that, I just drilled some holes and ran some pieces of sprue through the body for alignment. Then for the spacing of the cab and the bed, yeah, just some for sale sign. Now with all that out of the way, we could start on the actual body work. The usual things, clean up all the mold seams, deepening the panel lines, all the good stuff. And as you guys can see inside the fender wheels here, things are kind of rough. Alright, so let's get to work. I'm going to start by cleaning up the mold seam that runs along the inside of the wheel well. Now from there, I'm going to just make sure the rocker panels are level with each other, and there is a nasty mold seam along the bottom there. We also need to point out this gap. I didn't realize that was so bad or what it's for, but it's too late to fix now. We just have to live with it. I also didn't like how tall the rubber trim around the back window was. It's also very uneven, as you could see. So my remedy here is to build up a few layers of masking tape to get some height going, and then I just sand down to it. So once I hit the tape, I know there's about a 1/2 millimeter material left, and it will also be even. Just looks a whole lot better. In the reference photos I was looking at of the truck I'm trying to emulate, they had shaved off the locks, so I went ahead and just sanded those smooth as well. So if you guys watched Justin over J Hart Modelworks, his latest video, he got a new scriber. It's basically just a really sharp spike, and it got me to thinking, this fancy Olfa hobby knife I got, it has one of those. So let's chuck that thing up and see how it works. It works fairly well, actually, and it really shines going around corners and radiuses. Alright, so I wanted to get those nice and deep for the next part. I am going to sand off the drip rail because I've always thought they were ugly on these trucks. I don't like them. So I got all those shaved off, the panel lines deepened, and I figured I'd do that pre-shading thing that I'd started doing on the last build. Then I remembered we're painting this a dark color, so I'm not going to waste any time with pre-shading. What I will spend some time doing though is shaving off these wiper blades. If you guys remember right, I showed a screenshot of the truck I was trying to emulate back in a part 1 or part 2, I don't remember. And it's essentially just a stripped down strip truck. It's just for drag racing. Meaning it doesn't have any of the creature comforts that we'd find in our daily drivers. It doesn't have mirrors, it doesn't have wipers. The interior is just basic stripped down, just a bunch of roll cage in it. Which is kind of why I chose this direction with the build. If you guys remember, I mentioned I got to be done by March 15th. Well, right now it's 2 a.m. on the 17th, so that was 2 days ago. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. Where was I going with all that? Oh yeah, we're on a time crunch, so I'm doing just the easiest, less labor-intensive things I could do. The reference photo I was looking at, they had also shaved the vents in the cowl because, well, this thing don't need AC or heater. So I'm just gonna do like I always do. I'm gonna fill all that in with super glue and just sand it all down smooth later. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Anytime you guys are doing a big puddle of CA glue, just let it air dry. Do not use any kicker on it. I wanted to see how I was looking here, so I had done a quick layer of white primer. So far I see that body line, it's not real straight, but I can't fix that without completely sanding down that whole fender, and I don't have time to do that. So let's ignore it and move on to the back of the truck. That, well, that actually fits fairly well. Cool. I don't have to waste any time making that, right? So let's move on to the tonneau cover. So you guys know me. I like to do things cheap because I'm a bum. What I did is I went to Walmart. I got these beware of dog signs because, oop, what just happened? Something kicked my chair. Oh, it was a dog. How fitting. So my original intention was to use the thicker one here, but I gotta remember that 1 millimeter at this scale is 1 inch thick, and a 1 inch thick tonneau cover, it looks bad. Being that I already have a template, I just taped this onto a piece of the thinner stuff, traced around it, and cut it out. Yeah, this looks a whole lot better than that thicker tonneau cover. This actually looks to scale. Next order of business. The hood on this thing is not square, and there are gaps all around it. It's also not straight on the edges, as you guys could see. So the plan here, I'm just going to use some more of that for sale sign as some filler, and then just sand it back until it fits. But remember, this thing is not square. The front of it, it's actually spaced where I want it to be, so we only need to add some filler up until about right there. So I'm just going to use some good old Tamiya extra thin and this little strip that I cut off that for sale sign. So before I get to sanding all that flush, I'm going to do a quick little test fit. And this is exactly where I want it to be. It's not too tight, not too loose, and it's still going to leave some room there for a few coats of paint. Now that I'm happy with that, I could cut it down as flush as I possibly can with my nippers here, just to save myself some time sanding. Which is what I get to do now. Yay! Sanding. Fun. Joy. Emotions. I hate sanding, guys. I hate it. It is a necessary evil, though. Look at that hood fit. So moving on, we get to build some of the interior because we are building a roll cage along with this. So some of you may be asking, what does the interior in a roll cage have to do with the body? Well, not a lot. Just one thing, actually. This will make sense later. What I did though is I took the roll cage from the Chevy. It was about a half an inch too narrow, so I just cut it in half down the middle and added some pieces of sprue to widen it. And then I taped it to a piece of plexiglass just to keep it nice and flat and level. And yeah, you guys see my filler pieces there. I did not do a good job, but that's okay because I'm going to sand it all out later. This is more of a, hey, is this going to work kind of thing, so I didn't waste a lot of time making it pretty. Then the bottom gap down there, I don't care about that. That's going to be hidden behind the cab and the seats. Nobody will see that, so I just left all that out. There's also some cross braces that went through here, but I had to cut those out because they would not clear the armrest on the door panels. So I did this because I know I got to drill some holes in the dashboard, and we need the proper spacing because this has to fit under the windshield. Oh, I just realized I had done this for two reasons. One, we got to get the proper spacing for the windshield. The other reason, well, we'll see later. But what I'm doing here is I'm just making sure everything fits and I'm happy with it and it's setting level according to that back bar and the top of the interior tub. And I must have been happy with it because I'm now moving on to smoothing up all those seams that I had made. And after a little bit of sanding, I'm just using the edge of the nail file there just to make sure everything is level. Alright, so I am going to drill the holes in the dashboard now so we can get this thing mocked up. And the main reason I did all this now, well, the roll cage comes through the body. And I wanted to make sure that roll cage was actually going to fit and work before I start doing all that. So I'm confident it's going to work. So I went on to drilling a few holes in the cab and the tonneau cover. This piece doesn't have a whole lot to locate it, so I'd like to rotate in there, but you guys get the idea. I kind of just eyeballed this. It seems to be just right on the corner of the windowsill there. It's not perfect, but it looks close enough. Now to get the spacing where I drill the hole in the tonneau cover, I just mount that little cutoff into the body. Then I take a super thin Sharpie and I put a little bitty mark directly below the center of that. And before I drill another hole, I'm going to do a little sanity check. The approximate center on that is right at 8 millimeters. Now if we're going from the edge of the tonneau cover like I did a second ago, that is right at 8 millimeters as well. So off camera, I just drilled that hole out, and then I moved on to the front of the truck. And I know that older AMT and Revell chrome is rather stubborn, so I wanted to get this set up overnight before I went to bed. So here we are the following night, and that stuff didn't even get touched. Since I know the chrome is on there good and tight and not going anywhere, I'm just going to primer over it. And we could get away with doing that if we use a metal etching primer, which is mostly what Tamiya is. That is not that important on the front bumper though, because as you can see, I'd done some surgery. I shaved off the impact strip, I filled in the license plate, the side markers, and the holes where that front bumper or push bar thing went. So when all's said and done, this front bumper just going to be smooth, which is a real thing, by the way. If you guys look it up, they call it a cameo bumper. So I started getting this thing ready for paint, and I had this crazy idea. Since we have a chrome backing for the headlights, I'm just going to mask those off so they don't get covered in paint. Then later on, I'm going to make some lenses for it. Alright though, back to paint. And as you can see, that front bumper came out super smooth. I am super happy with that. That's going to look real good on this truck. Alright, so moving on to paint. If you guys remember our reference photo here, the bed is a darker primer than the cab. And I went through how to do that, and I realized that, hey, my phone's playing music. It's not recording. My idea, though, to keep the bed darker, I just went over that with some black paint. So hopefully when I shoot the primer over it, it will just be a shade darker. Yeah, see, you guys didn't miss much. I could still talk my way through it. With all that being said, though, I'm just moving on to coats 2 and 3, and I am using that black surfacer that I had got from Splash Paints. And just like that, thanks to YouTube Voodoo, everything is now just a few shades darker. We gave that a good few hours to dry, and I could peel off this masking tape, and we could finally move on to the base coat, which is primer. Is that an oxymoron, using primer as a base coat? And it looks like this idea may work. That bed is just a shade darker. So I moved on to coat 2 just to even everything out, and it had completely drowned out that darker base coat. So my idea didn't work out after all. Bummer. Oh well, though. These things happen. Not every idea works out. So I'm just going to move on to painting the trim and the rubber around the windows. So now I'm just going to waste a whole minute ripping off this masking tape. Seriously, I don't know why I left this segment so long. I also don't know why there's an unfilled panel line on the cowl in front of the driver's side wing window there. How did I miss that? That thing is huge. This is clearly not my best work, and I apologize to you guys. I'm sorry. I'm better than this. So, might as well move on to more bad news. My idea to use plexiglass to make some lenses, it didn't turn out that well. The smaller and smaller I cut the pieces, the more prone they were to cracking. So plan B was to backfill it all with some UV resin, but this light was dying. It was not curing that resin at all. So I did what any sane person would do, and I spent some money. So that's a little bit brighter, bright enough to get the job done at least. So let's move on to something that's really hard to mess up because I need some good news with this thing right now. Alright, moment of truth. Let's see if I had any bleed through. That looks good, other than the fact that the gray kind of drowns out the silver. But hey, no bleed through. There was no bleed through anywhere actually. I needed this, guys. My morale just went up by 1 point. So the paint dry, I'm just moving on to kind of filling in that little area with some Tamiya clear orange to replicate the side marker. And why does a race car need a side marker? I don't know. It was on a reference photo, so I included it. I could have easily shaved that off, but I don't know. Just breaks up all the gray primer. These also had a really good fit as well. Other than the hood, I have had no fitment issues with this truck. And I realize that's probably not saying a lot since I've hacked this truck up and I'm using barely any of the original parts. And last minute here, I had this idea that popped into my head. I really need to stop doing this because I'm running out of time. I'm sure some of you already know what's going on here, but yeah, I'm going to make the hood carbon fiber. Back in the day, they would have used a hardwood hood, which was fiberglass. This is 2023. Fiberglass is obsolete. Unless you have a boat. Believe it or not, but carbon fiber is not fully waterproof. So I guess fiberglass still has a use in this day and age. And I thought the reflection of the brush, I just caught it out of the corner of my eye. I thought there was a hair that got down inside that stuff. You guys have all watched me work carbon fiber before. I know what I'm doing, which is why right here, I was not prepared. There we go. The most important tool when it comes to doing any kind of decals. There's kind of a dull spot right there, and I don't know what it is. Put some water on it to see if it'd be hidden under clear, and it looks like it might be, so I'm just going to continue to the setting solution. So I left this stuff on overnight to work its magic. When I came down the next night, this is what I had. Perfect. Alright, so to wrap up this video, we got just one last thing to do, and that's just put this bumper on. So for the time being, I am going to leave the grill off because I still do not have a radiator worked out. So I may need to do some cutting on that core support, and it's just going to be easier without a grill in place. That is it though, guys. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and have a good night.